I never expected my parents to choose peace and quiet over my life, especially not when I was in active labor, stranded on the side of a highway with barely enough battery left on my phone to call for help. But then again, I should have seen it coming. My entire life had been a rehearsal for that momentan, endless series of sacrifices and humiliations, masked as understanding and being the bigger person. My name is May, and I was born the year before Alina, which made me the older sister. But you'd never know it by the way our parents treated us. Alina was the star, the princess, the delicate glass flower they tiptoed around as though a single word out of place might shatter her. She cried easily, demanded more, and somehow everything in our household revolved around protecting her feelings. If she needed quiet, the television went off. She had a bad day, we canceled plans, okay? And if I ever dared to voice my needs, I was met with that same sharp-edged tone from Mom. May, please, don't make this harder for your sister. It wasn't just exhausting, it was erased. When I graduated high school with honors, there was a rushed dinner and an awkward half-smile from Dad, while Alina's participation ribbon from a summer art camp 2 months later earned her a backyard party with banners and balloons. I still remember standing in the kitchen cleaning up the cake plates while Mom told the guests, "She's such a sensitive soul, our Alina. We just want her to know she's loved." I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, what about me? What about the kid who never asked for much and still got less? But I didn't. I learned to swallow it every single time. And by the time I was in my 20s, working a full-time job while Alina lived at home and bounced from therapy to therapy, I had long given up hope that anything would change. So, when I found out I was pregnant at 32 alone, afraid, but quietly thrilled, I thought maybe this would be my chance, my moment. The turning point where my parents would finally see me not as the supporting character in someone else's drama, but as a whole person. I envisioned my mom fussing over baby clothes, my dad helping me fix up the spare room, and even Alina showing up with a neutral onesie or two. Instead, I got silence. Well, not total silence. There were words, just not the ones I wanted. "You're doing this alone, May?" Mom had said over dinner one night, her wine glass half empty and her voice like a tightrope. "That's your choice. You can't expect us to rearrange our lives just because you made a decision without thinking it through." Dad just nodded. Alina sniffled dramatically. She'd just broken up with her newest boyfriend, a guy named Carson or Carter or some other clean-cut name that ended in heartbreak. Everyone was walking on eggshells again because she was in a fragile state. Of course she was. She always was. And so when Mom called a week later asking if I wanted to come along on a weekend trip to see my Aunt Darcy upstate, it'll be nice to spend time together. May. Plus, Alina could really use the distraction. I hesitated. I was 38, weeks pregnant. My ankles were so swollen they looked like they belonged to someone else. My back ached. I hadn't slept through the night in a week. But I also hadn't seen Aunt Darcy in over a year, and a part of me, maybe the same part that still secretly hoped for parental affection, thought, maybe this is them trying. Maybe they're offering to be closer now. I said yes, against my better judgment. I packed my hospital bag just in case, slipped on my most forgiving maternity dress, and climbed into the back seat of Dad's SUV that Friday morning. Alina, of course, took the front. She had her headphones, a lavender eye mask, and an emotional support pillow shaped like a llama. "Don't mind her," Mom said, as if I'd made a face. "She's been really emotionally depleted." And so I sat quietly, listening to her hum along to spa music while I timed the tightening sensation in my belly that had started before we even left the driveway. At first, I told myself it was just false labor. Braxton Hicks, like the apps, warned me. But by the second hour of the trip, I knew something was different. The cramping came in waves, deep, low, and rhythmic. I tried shifting positions. I drank water. I clutched my belly and closed my eyes. Nothing helped. When we passed a sign that said rest area to 5 miles, I finally spoke. "Hey, can we stop soon?" I think I might be having real contractions. Alina peeled off her mask and groaned. Are you serious right now? You're not due for another 2 weeks. I know, but I've been timing them. They're every 10 minutes now. Oh my God, she muttered. Why does this always happen when I'm trying to relax? Mom twisted in her seat to look at me with a tight smile. May, honey, you're probably just anxious. This is your first baby. It's normal to overreact a little. Just try to breathe. No, Mom, I'm not overreacting. I need to go too. The hospital. That's ridiculous, Alina snapped. We're literally in the middle of nowhere. You want to ruin this entire trip because you think something might be happening? I'm in labor, I said louder, my voice shaking. I can't sit in this car for another 3 hours. Dad finally spoke. Let's not escalate. May, can't you wait until we get to Darcy's? There's a hospital nearby and it'll be calmer than pulling over on the highway. I don't think I can wait, I said, gripping the edge of my seat as another wave hit me. This is happening. I need to go now. Well, that's just great, Alina hissed. Now I'm having a panic attack. "'Kay, that's it," Mom said, turning around fully now. "We're dropping you off at the next safe exit. You can figure out your own transportation from there. You made your choices, May. Don't make them everyone else's problem." I stared at her in disbelief. "You're seriously going to leave me on the side of the road? Don't be dramatic," she said. "You'll be fine. Just call someone. There are apps for this kind of thing." The SUV slowed as we approached an exit ramp that led to a tiny gas station and a closed-down diner. The gravel's shoulder crunched beneath the tires as Dad pulled over. "Here," he said. "You'll be more comfortable out of the car anyway." I was in too much pain to fight. My hands shook as I grabbed my hospital bag and phone. The battery icon blinked red 8%. I stepped out of the car slowly, trying not to collapse as the contraction radiated through me. And as they drove away, Alina pulled the eye mask back over her face. I stood there alone, wind whipping my hair around my face, the sound of tires fading into the distance. That moment, standing in the dust with my womb clenched in pain and my heart split wide open, was the clearest moment of my entire life. Everything I had pretended not to see suddenly crystallized. I wasn't just forgotten. I had never been seen at all. I called 911, but my phone died just after I gave them my location. I sat on the curb, legs shaking, praying someone would come. 10 minutes later, a semi-truck pulled into the gas station, and a middle-aged man in a flannel jacket stepped out. He saw me and ran over. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I'm in labor," I whispered. "My family left me here." He didn't ask why. He just nodded and said, "Come on, let's get you to a hospital." He drove me 20 minutes to the nearest all the while calling ahead to let them know I was coming. When we arrived, nurses were waiting at the entrance. They rushed me inside, helped me into a wheelchair, and within 45 minutes, I gave birth to a 6-pound, healthy little girl. I named her Ivy. She had a tiny dimple on her left cheek and the biggest, angriest cry I'd ever heard, like she knew what it had taken for her to get here. I held her in my arms and cried, not just because she was beautiful or because I was overwhelmed, but because for the first time in my life, someone was mine. Not to take care of everyone else, not to keep peace, just mine. And that night, as she slept in a plastic bassinet next to my hospital bed, I made myself a promise. I would never let anyone make her feel the way I'd felt my whole life. Not invisible, not second best, not abandoned. We would rewrite the rules. We would build a world of our own. And no one, especially not my parents, would ever be allowed to take that away. 3 years passed without a single photo, message, or update sent to my parents. And I knew it burned them inside, but not enough for them to truly reflect. Only enough for them to resent that they no longer had access to me. Or worse, to Ivy. They didn't know when she took her first steps, said her first word, or got her first scrape on the playground. They weren't there for the colic nights, or the sleepy afternoons where she curled against my chest like she'd never want to let go. and they certainly weren't there to see what I had to become to keep us afloat. In those early months after her birth, I didn't have the luxury of grief. I poured my energy into survival, rebuilding not just a life but a foundation. While Ivy napped, I taught myself graphic design. I studied color theory, typography, and user experience. I took on small jobs logos for Etsy stores, flyers for local events, birthday invites for frazzled moms. The pay was humble, but the feedback was strong. My clients loved my style, simple, emotional, clean. It grew faster than I anticipated. Soon, referrals started flooding in. I made a small website. I branded myself Ivy and May Creative, a nod to my daughter and the new self I was building. Every night after Ivy fell asleep, I worked. Every rejection made me sharper. I learned to say no to lowball offers, to raise my rates, to stand up for the value of my time. I watched online tutorials at 2 a.m., fell asleep with a stylus in my hand, and woke up with Ivy babbling beside me. We shared everything: spaghetti lunches, splashy bath times, whispered bedtime stories that always ended with, "And the girl built a world where no one could hurt her again." The girl was me. I was building that world one design at a time. Within a year, I had a consistent stream of freelance work and a solid reputation on design forums. Within 2, I had signed contracts with mid-tier brands and started outsourcing small parts of the workload to other freelancers. By the 3rd year, I was leading a boutique team of 5 and had just closed a 6-figure deal with a luxury maternity label who wanted a full visual, rebranded exclusively by single mothers. That project got picked up by a business podcast, then an online magazine, then a viral TikTok story by one of my clients who praised the invisible powerhouse behind the brand. That's when the email invitations started pouring in: conferences, panels, workshops. I declined most. I didn't want the spotlight. I wanted peace. But when the Women in Tech and Design Summit reached out asking me to keynote a talk on branding for empathy-based business models, I accepted. I told myself it was a one-time thing, that I'd wear something professional, speak for 20 minutes, smile politely, and go home. I didn't even realize my parents' company and old-school ad agencies, still clinging to paper mailers and outdated billboards, was one of the minor sponsors until I saw the logo on the event page the night before. I felt the old ache stir, but I pushed it down. I wasn't here for them. I was here for me. The morning of the summit, I kissed Ivy on the forehead and left her with my best friend, Amanda. I walked into the venue wearing a slate blue pantsuit and heels I hadn't dared wear since before my belly swelled with Ivy. My hair was pulled back, my slides crisp and prepared. When I walked onto that stage, I didn't just speak, I owned the space. I told my story, not the personal betrayal part, but the truth of what it meant to build a life while invisible. I spoke about a design that didn't scream for attention, but whispered trust, about storytelling that prioritized the viewer's heart, about brand intimacy and emotional loyalty. When I finished, the applause rolled through the room like a tide. As I stepped off stage, I spotted them: Mom in her stiff beige cardigan, Dad in a wrinkled blazer, both of them staring like they'd seen a ghost. I didn't flinch. I didn't wave. I walked right past them and into the arms of my future. That night, back in my hotel room, I opened my inbox to a familiar subject line: "Can we talk?" It was from Mom. The message was almost comical in its attempt at humility. She wrote that Alina was going through a difficult time again, and that she needed some space therapeutic isolation. Or something equally vague. She wondered if Ivy and I might stay for a bit so Alina could focus on herself. Even hinted that perhaps it's time we all let the past go. Let the past go. As if the past had just been a misunderstanding, like someone forgetting a birthday. Not abandoning their daughter in labor on the side of a highway because their other daughter needed a nap. I didn't reply. I read it once, twice, then deleted it. 2 days later, I got another email. It's time from Dad. "Your mother isn't feeling well. Would mean a lot if you visited. Lena's therapist says having the house to herself is essential to her recovery. Please don't be difficult. That line, please don't be difficult, seared through me like acid. I had been labeled difficult since I was 10 years old for asking to open my birthday presents before Alina was ready to watch, for crying too loud when I broke my arm, for telling the truth too clearly. And here it was again. They didn't want me. They wanted a solution. They wanted me to play the quiet, helpful role again, the temporary buffer, the sister who knew her place. But they didn't know who I had become. They had no idea that I had built not just a company, but a life so sturdy it no longer bent to their guilt trips. So I decided if they wanted to see me, really see me, they would have to see all of me and understand exactly what they had given up. I began to plan, not for revenge, not for pettiness, but for clarity, for power. I didn't want an apology. I wanted them to realize I no longer needed one. First, I contacted a real estate agent who'd been emailing me quarterly ever since. I did a design project for her firm, told her I was looking for property within 3 miles of my parents' neighborhood. Something upscale, something visible, something that made a statement. 2 weeks later, she showed me a sleek, modern home with a glass front and a view that overlooked the quiet cul-de-sac my parents had called home for 20 years. It had a garden, a home office with a skylight, and a long private driveway. I made an offer that day cash. My business has done well. I'd invested carefully, lived modestly, and reinvested every major contract. I wasn't just comfortable. I was formidable. Then I began construction on the adjacent lot, a community, co-working space for women entrepreneurs with a built-in daycare and therapy lounge. I called it the Ivy Collective. For the women who were told to wait their turn, the slogan read, it went live on Instagram a week later. My inbox exploded with DMZs, press inquiries, and praise. But the one message I waited for most came a few days after the sign went up on the construction lot. It was from Alina. So you're moving in next door. Great. Exactly what I need. No greeting, no warmth, no curiosity about my daughter. Only her discomfort, front and center. I replied simply, don't worry, I don't expect anything from you. And I meant it. I wasn't there to reconnect. I was there to exist without apology. The day we moved in, I wore white. Ivy wore a tiny denim dress and twirled on the front lawn. My team came by to help set up the home office, and I invited the neighborhood kids over for lemonade and cookies. My parents watched from their window. I didn't wave. Later that week, Mom appeared at the edge of my driveway, clutching a container of banana bread like it was a peace treaty. Hi, sweetheart, she said, smiling like nothing had ever happened. I heard you were back. Thought you might like this. I thanked her, took the bread, and handed it to Ivy, who said, we already made muffins. Mom's smile faltered. How's everything been? You've done well? Your father and I are proud, are you? I asked. I never heard anything. Well, we didn't know where to reach you, she said, avoiding my gaze. Phones work both ways, I replied, but I understand. You were probably busy taking care of Alina. She flinched. She's been through a lot. I'll have, I said gently, then closed the conversation with a polite nod. As she walked away, I felt it not triumph, but peace. True peace. Because the power was no longer theirs to hold. I didn't need closure. I didn't need their love. I had built a life where I was the foundation, not the footnote. I had created a space for myself and my daughter where our needs came first. Where silence didn't mean erasure, and where legacy meant something more than suffering quietly. Ivy climbed into my lap that night as we watched the sun dip behind the houses, her tiny hand resting on my arm. Mama, she said, are we home now? Yes, I whispered, pressing my lips to her forehead. We're exactly where we're supposed to be. And I knew, without a shadow of doubt, that the seed I planted the day they left me behind on the highway had blossomed into something they could never uproot. Strength, autonomy, and a love that required no permission to exist. The day I told my parents I would come visit felt like setting a trap wrapped in velvet, But it wasn't malice that drove MIT, was clarity. It's the kind that only comes after years of being dismissed, diminished, and used like a buffer between chaos and comfort. I wrote them a short, calculated email. Let's bury the past. I'll bring Ivy. Let's do this in person. It'll be healing. I knew those words would land like honey in their mouths. Predictably, Mom responded within hours, overflowing with gratitude, telling me she'd prepare a room and even bake my favorite apple cinnamon muffins. She used words like reconnect and new beginnings, but they were just the same. Manipulative gloss she'd always used to draw me back into their orbit when they needed something. Alina, of course, never replied. She had always been too entitled to speak directly to me unless it was to issue a complaint or a command. But that silence didn't bother me anymore, served as a familiar warning bell I had long since learned not to ignore. I packed slowly, carefully clothes for Ivy, books she loved, fresh snacks, her stuffed owl she refused to sleep without, and slid the folded paperwork of a home purchase into the bottom of my bag like a dagger beneath silk. Because this wasn't just a visit. This was my reveal. My moment. Not revenge, no. I didn't want their pain. I wanted my presence to be undeniable, unmovable, uninterpretable as anything other than power. The morning of the visit was bathed in sun so bright it felt artificial, the kind of clarity only nature could mock with such timing. Ivy hummed beside me in her car seat as we drove into the neighborhood I had once escaped its sterile sidewalks, perfectly trimmed hedges, and invisible rules of decorum that had always protected appearances while suffocating truth. When we pulled into my parents' driveway, Mom burst through the front door as if we were celebrities arriving for a red carpet event. She enveloped me in a hug that felt too tight and too rehearsed while her eyes darted past me toward Ivy, with a hunger that hadn't been there before. "She's grown so much," she said breathlessly. "You've done so well, May. Really." Dad emerged next, slower, more stoic, but with a softened face that he probably thought passed for remorse. "It's good to see you," he said, like we were strangers meeting at a reunion, not blood relatives who had severed ties in the most unholy way possible. Inside the house, nothing had changed. The furniture was the same. The air still held that faint scent of lavender and guilt. The family photos still lined the hallway, but mine stopped abruptly at age 18, as though I had vanished after that. Alina descended the stairs wearing a silk robe and a look of bored suspicion, as if my arrival disrupted her personal climate. "So this is happening now?" she asked flatly. "Hi, Alina," I said, matching her tone with effortless grace. "You look well." She rolled her eyes and vanished into the kitchen. Ivy clung to my hand, unsure of the strange faces claiming to be her family, her little body pressed close to mine like she could sense the history in the walls. "Why don't you let her play in the living room?" Mom suggested. "We've got her some toys, new ones." I nodded and helped Ivy settle in, placing her coloring books on the floor beside the couch. Then I excused myself, said I had something to show them. When I opened the front door again, a woman in business casual attire stepped through behind me, clipboard in hand, a camera slung across her shoulder. "You're selling?" Mom asked, eyes wide, voice tinged with panic. I smiled, calmly. "Not yours. Mine. I just bought the house next door." A beat of stunned silence. "The one with the panoramic view you always said was wasted on the Hendersons? That's mine now." Their mouths opened, but no words came. "And the lot behind it," I continued smoothly, "is being developed into a community co-working space for women, especially single mothers, fully funded by my company. We'll have therapy rooms, childcare, career support. It's called the Ivy Collective." I turned toward the living room where my daughter sat cross-legged, coloring without fear. Inspired by her, Alina reappeared. Arms crossed. "Why here?" she asked, venom thinly veiled. "Why right next to us?" I met her gaze squarely. "Because peace and silence are important. And I'm finally in a position to protect mine. without begging for approval. Dad swallowed hard. May, listen. We made mistakes, but we're still family. I turned to him, my voice steady, but resolute. You left your daughter in labor on a highway because your other daughter needed a nap. Family doesn't do that. Mom's eyes welled up, mouth trembling. We didn't know it would be that bad, no, I said. Do you? Didn't care to ask. The silence that followed was deafening, not just between us, but the kind that echoed across decades of buried pain, of erased birthdays, of unacknowledged effort. They scrambled, then reasons, excuses, tears. They spoke of Alina's condition, of their exhaustion, of how they'd been trying their best, always. But I didn't argue. I didn't need to. I had already won the war they didn't know we were in. I walked Ivy back to the car with calm precision, promised we'd be back for lunch after settling into our new home, and left them standing in their driveway with nothing but questions they should have asked years ago. Over the next few weeks, the view from their windows changed. Where there had once been a neglected property, there was now a home buzzing with life. A garden planted with wildflowers and edible herbs, laughter drifting through open windows. Ivy danced barefoot in the yard while I took meetings on the porch. My staff came and went, bright and brilliant and unbothered. The Ivy Collective rose beside us like a monument to resilience, its name carved in soft rose gold lettering on a curved white stone wall. My parents watched it all unfold in real time, powerless to stop it, to edit it, to center themselves in it. They started dropping hints. Mom sent over baked goods. Dad offered to mow the lawn. Alina even left a note once. We should talk sometime. But I had no more conversations left to give. I had spoken my piece with my presence. I had shown them exactly what they had lost when they deemed me expendable. I let their invitations pile up unanswered. I didn't slam the door. I simply never opened it again. One morning, Ivy asked if the people in the house next door were our friends. I looked at her, the child whose life began with abandonment, and who now lives surrounded by love, and said simply, "No, baby, they're just people we used to know." And that was the truth. That's all they were now. Not enemies. Not villains. Just a closed chapter in a book I no longer had to reread. Months passed. My parents grew more desperate. They showed up at the collective one afternoon, trying to act like supportive neighbors. "We'd love to volunteer," Mom said. "Whatever you need, we're here." I thanked them, but politely declined. "Our volunteers are all women from the community we're serving," I said, smiling. "But thank you for offering." They left quietly. That night, I lit a single candle in the center of my living room, a tradition I had invented for Ivy and me. We called it the Light of Forward. We lit it on days we chose ourselves, and we whispered dreams into its flame. That evening, I whispered, "We are free." And Ivy, without prompting, echoed, "We are strong." I held her close as the flame flickered, and I realized something important. True revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't fury or spectacle. It was the quiet removal of access. It was the choice to go on, to bloom anyway, to never again need their version of love to feel worthy of your own. The people who abandoned me on that highway would now spend every day watching me rise from the soil they tried to bury me in. And that, I finally understood, was the sweetest silence of all.